Welcome to those who are joining now. We will wait a few minutes until we reach critical mass, and then we can get started.
That's gonna be lit, by the way, for the Super Bowl. That should be dope.
Okay, looks like we can go ahead and get started. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the best panel of the day, Access Granted, the Guide to Black Wealth. My name is Russell Williams. I'm a second-year MBA student here at Michigan Ross, and I'm joined today by three amazing panelists. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is the founder and CEO of Enrich Her, a financial technology platform that matches revenue-generating companies led by women and founders of color to individual and institutional sources of funding. She holds a PhD in systems engineering with a minor in finance, a master of science and information technology, emphasizing in information systems engineering, a bachelor of arts in business management economics, and a bachelor of science in computer engineering, achieving summa cum laude in each. She served on the commission of the Women for City of Atlanta and was honored as one of the Women Who Means Business by Atlanta Business Chronicle, one of the 40 under 40 by Georgia Trend, a Halcon Fellow Social Impact, one of the top 25 disruptors and innovators in tech, one of the 27 Black founders and investors to watch in 2019 by PitchBook. Man, let me catch my breath. A LinkedIn Top Voice Technology and winner of the FinTech South 2020 Innovation Challenge. And you can catch her on Super Bowl commercial tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the panel, Dr. Roshana Novelis. Our next panelist is a serial entrepreneur, certified public accountant, real estate investor, and educator. She is the founder and CEO of Fola Financial, a firm dedicated to assisting individuals and businesses with navigating their financial journeys by providing bookkeeping, tax planning, and tax preparation services. She is also the founder of Tax Essentials Learning Program, where she educates aspiring tax professionals on tax code and teaches them how to build their own tax practices. Committed to using her accumulated skills and knowledge to impact the lives of those who seek financial guidance, she truly believes that education is the most powerful tool which you could use to change the world. I'd like to welcome to the panel, Shania Wilson, better known as the People's CPA.
Hello, everyone.
And our final panelist is an Ivy League educated Chicago native dedicated to increasing access to financial education and literacy. A former Wall Street professional from Morgan Stanley and Grosvenor Capital, he is now a hip hop artist and television personality for Revolt TV, who uses his brand to empower people through merging education and entertainment. He is the creator of Maconomics YouTube series, where he gives plain advice to people who may not have access to traditional avenues to receive this information. Maconomics gives his audience a fundamental understanding of financial freedom from an urban perspective. As a result, he's developed corporate partnerships with brands such as Bank of America and SoFi, while also doing corporate financial development for employees at Google, LinkedIn, Salesforce, and many more. I'd like to welcome Sharif McDonald to the panel, also known as Ross Mack.
Hey, let's do it. Appreciate the intro.
Let's do it. So, the dialogue today will focus on three segments. First, the racial wealth gap, its origins, and why it matters for the larger conversation. Second, we'll delve a little bit into personal wealth creation and practical tips specific to this audience of prospective students, current students, and alumni. And lastly, Black poverty at large and how we as Black professionals can start the conversation. But before we do, a few housekeeping items. So if you hear something that you love, be sure to drop it in the chat. Also, we want to see it on social media, so please post with hashtag ALE45. And then towards the end of the conversation, we'll open it up for any personal questions. So make sure you start thinking to those questions now. So first, we'll get started with the generational wealth gap. So, generational wealth is the foundation for access to better education, healthcare, and jobs. With that being said, the People CPA, could you please talk broadly about where we are as it relates to the Black wealth gap? Why does it matter that we focus on wealth as opposed to just income when talking about wealth inequality in our country? And what effect does this have on intergenerational wealth?
Really good question. So just to get started, as a CPA, I like to break things down in accounting terms. So when most people think about wealth, they're thinking about their profit and loss statement. How much net income do I have, right? So that is, your income that you've made, less your expenses, and this is what we got left over. But wealth building actually is formed on your balance sheet, not your profit and loss statement. And let me just talk about what that means, right? On your balance sheet, for those of you who are accounting majors, you guys will be familiar, that's going to state your assets, liabilities, and your equity, right? Your P&L is a temporary schedule that gets closed out to retain earnings at year end. That is an account on your balance sheet, right? I know I got super accounting right there, but it's important to think about it this way. Most people think about, let me get a six-figure job, let me, make X amount of dollars, and that's all profit and loss statement stuff. Where the asset is, all right, well, here's my cash account. Here's my buildings that I own. Here's the homes that I own. Here's the businesses that I own. Here's the artwork that I own. Those are assets. The thing about your P&L and your balance sheet is that you can't pass down your P&L, but you can pass down your balance sheet, right? So when it comes to building wealth, it's important to change our minds in terms of how we see income. And it's not just about how much you make, it's about how much assets you purchase. Because essentially, once you start working, once you stop working, you can't give away your paycheck. What you can give away to your children, to your children's children, is those buildings that you own, those homes that you own, those assets that you own. So essentially, it's really switching your way of thinking from more of a P&L mindset to a balance sheet mindset, and understanding that assets are what's going to get you to building wealth. Having equity is what's going to get you to having wealth, right? Your income is temporarily, your balance sheet is a fixed thing, because ultimately, when it comes down to estate planning, that's what they're going to take in consideration. It's your balance sheet. So right now, as a Black community, I feel like people are attending to more of this specific area where we see a bunch of Black home ownership, we see a bunch of Black owned businesses. And again, this is moving away from, let me get this corporate job and lock in this salary, to like, let me lock in these assets so I can give these away to my children. So essentially, I do believe that the culture is getting a lot better. Black ownership in general is becoming a lot more popular, and it's beautiful to me. So I'm lucky to be a CPA that's, in these streets with our people, making sure that they're not only accumulating these assets, but that they are also being able to understand how to effectively pass that down for the next generation.
Thank you for that. No, I know that gave me a flashback to our core accounting classes. It's probably pretty fresh for our first year MBA students, but for some of those who are in second year, maybe have to dust off those accounting skills real quick. So, the racial wealth gap is widely acknowledged, and there's a considerable gap between, the assets that white people have versus the assets that Black people have, due to slavery and the perpetual system that excludes minorities in every way. So, Ross Mack, given your background in finance and the platform you have built, can you speak to some areas, for example, education or resources, that we should begin looking at and thinking about now?
Yeah, I think when we think about the racial wealth gap, it is something that is a huge problem, and it's only going to continue to get larger and larger. And I think when we start thinking about how to actually bridge it, us as Black people, we have to continue to figure out ways to get more access, whether it's access to information or better access to resources, because, the statistics are saying that by 2053, the net worth of African Americans is going to be zero. Literally, we're not going to have any money in another 30 years or so. And so when we think about, how are we able to rectify this, it is access to information, is better access to resources, whether it is better loans to actually, build assets, whether that is, like the people CPA is talking about, whether it's real estate. I think that more Black people need to start taking part in investing into the stock market. I think in our community, we're taught to work hard for money, but we're never really taught to allow our money to truly work hard for us. And so for me, kind of my entire brand with Maconomics is helping educate people to start saying, okay, how can I start building generational wealth? How can I start developing a different mindset when it comes to trying to help bridge this wealth gap? Because at the end of the day, African Americans, we have $2 trillion worth of buying power. It's just that dollar doesn't circulate in our community. So when we start thinking about what we need to do as a people, we need to start supporting more Black-owned businesses. We need to start spending less and investing more, right? I think that, we have a lot of buying power, but we're spending as opposed to investing. This past year was very eye-opening because we were in the midst of a huge global pandemic, and everyone was experiencing relatives passing away or getting sick, and a lot of people losing job security or actually losing their jobs in general. But the stock market was booming. Why? Because ever since even Obama was in place, there's been accommodative policy to actually help inflate the stock market, right? This is America. One thing that we're going to judge how well our country's doing is probably first the stock market, then we look at what the actual, unemployment rate is, right? But at the end of the day, Black people own 1% of the stock market. So when you look at all of these bailout programs, most Black people, unfortunately, we were trying to find ways to get our stimulus check, which was probably spent before we even got it. Whereas, a lot of people that actually owned stock assets were able to truly benefit in the wealth accumulation, right? Understand the stock market in the midst of all of what was going on, this entire global pandemic was trading at all-time highs, and it's still trading at all-time highs. And once again, us as Black people only own 1% of that. So my entire mission is like, one, how do we get more access to information to start saying, okay, let me actually start investing, right? Because I think that's really the only true way that we're going to help bridge the gap. But, to the other part of the question is, what are some ways that we can try to get, some more fairness, whether it's less predatory lending, right? It's a cash advance in every Black community in this country. We need better loans. We need better funding for our education. A lot of underfunded schools in the inner cities, but I think that's how we really want to take a look at it, right? I think that the latter part of what I'm saying, we kind of need, maybe government help, but on the former part, that's more of a mindset. And I want, all Black people to start, taking a step forward and saying, okay, let me start spending this money in my community as well as investing.
Man, that's amazing. I knew there was a reason Biden hadn't dropped them the next round of stimmy checks yet. They were waiting for have this conversation.
Exactly.
Exactly. But so the unfortunate truth is that there are drivers of wealth that non-Blacks have used for years, and reclaiming the Black voice and wealth accumulation will require a paradigm shift for Black people. So let's level set our minds for the rest of this conversation. So Dr. Roshana, can you help give the audience a mindset shift to prepare for the actionable steps we'll speak about for the rest of this panel?
Yes, of course. Now, mindset is a number one indicator in what you attract into your life and what you feel like you deserve. So, my mother told me at the age of 12 that all women needed to be in charge of their own economic power. And so, at the age of 15, I told her, hey, I'm going to pay for my whole college education. I wrote 200 letters to organizations from across the country and raised over $600,000 that paid for all of those degrees you already heard about. And then much later, when I owned my tax and accounting practice, I wanted to take a break to really focus on mindfulness. And so I left the country for 6 weeks and moved to Thailand and studied at an ashram. And at the ashram, we didn't have hot water, we didn't have heat, we ate off of the land. And I realized that we have everything that we need. And the thing is, a lot of times we get distracted about with things that other people have, living with the like as the Joneses, and don't live a life in alignment with our own dreams and our own goals. So I want each one of you to ask yourself, what do you want? What do you deserve? Do you believe that you're worth it? Do you believe that everything is working out for you? And because if you do, you'll see that life becomes easier. It's easier to make those financial decisions that are in alignment with your dreams, and that you'll be able to live a life in alignment with what you want.
Man, Dr. Rashawn, we may have to link after this. I'm trying to set up a GoFundMe page to fund myself. I need some of those fundraising skills you're talking about there.
Well, funny that you should ask. So Enrich Her is a fundraising platform for women-led and Black-owned businesses who want affordable capital for their company. So if you look at our website now, you'll see amazing Black-owned businesses that we're supporting. And so my whole mission and my whole goal is to help people live in alignment with their dreams and use those skills that I have with aggregating capital and share those with other people so that they could do the same thing.
Awesome. So now we're going to shift gears into the personal wealth creation portion. And first, we're going to start off talking about so the people in the audience who are preparing to enter business school this fall. So the People CPA, can you help future rosters in the audience think through the best ways to prepare their finances prior to starting business school in a way that won't be impedant to their long-term wealth? This is important because the MBA journey means foregoing 2 years of income, potentially using loans to pay for school and personal expenses, and such. Guidance on how to prepare before entering business school in the fall would be extremely helpful for these future rosters.
So I'm all about trying to avoid debt as much as you can. When I did my MBA, I did a work study. So I was teaching while I was in school. And at the same time, I was also interning with different CPA firms that was by my school. So luckily, I didn't have to pay, I didn't have to take out any loans to fund my MBA program. So I would say for sure to start by doing a thorough analysis of where you are financially, right? Because they say like there's a whole idea of good debt and bad debt. The thing about debt from degrees is that it's really hard to quantify, because essentially it's up to you to kind of leave school and make use of your degree as much as you can. So I would say for sure to seek funding as much as you can. It's really hard to leave an MBA program knowing that you're going to get into the workforce, but then you have this debt hovering over your head. Yes, they give you 6 months of forbearance, and hopefully Biden does pass this law to eliminate student loan debt. Let's all pray for that, right? Let's all pray for that. But if you can, I would say again, I would take Dr. Ashana's advice and say that to seek as much funding as you can so you can avoid that debt. I don't consider student loan debt being good debt, and that's just me. I do think, mortgages can be a good debt. They can be bad debts too. So I would say to seek as much funding as you can in the beginning, but then what's also important is to have your mindset fixed for what you're gonna do after you get that MBA degree, right? I love MBA degrees, and I'm happy that, I stayed in school and I did get mine because in those programs, typically you're learning real world applications of business concepts, right? Which is very different from what you study when you study undergrad. So I would say when I was in my MBA program, I was already putting together the idea of starting my CPA firm. I was already putting the idea of, having a real estate firm. I was already putting together the idea of being a serial entrepreneur and creating wealth for myself, because what I learned in those MBA classes actually did help me a lot with accomplishing what I have accomplished thus far. So I would say for sure to have that in mind. You don't want to get this degree and then now you're depending on society to value that degree after school. And I'm not saying to be an entrepreneur, but I'm saying to figure out ways for you to build wealth. And again, that's by having different asset classes. So whether you are gonna, be in school, think about how you can take different classes, learning how to invest in the stock market or how to invest in real estate. My favorite class when I was in my MBA program was international business. I now do international business. So I would say for sure, you want to make sure that you are not just, you don't want to take out as much debt in the beginning, but once you leave that program, figure out ways to maximize the value of your degree, right? Because people will put a cap on what you can make. They'll put a cap on what you can do. Oh, you're a CPA, you need to work for a big 4 firm, and that's all. Well, I took the CPA license and I turned it into 3 different businesses, a real estate development company, doing these brand deals, etc. So I used my one thing and turned it into at least 7 streams of income. So I do want to encourage you all to think about that while you're in your program. How can I use what I'm learning to create several different streams of income for my own personal wealth?
Man, I hope they're taking notes in the audience, because they are not giving discounts for this online MBA experience that we have right now. So just make sure y'all know that. So we're about 3 months away from the first year MBA students beginning their summer internships, and these internships offer ranges of compensation between $15,000 and $30,000 total for a 10 to 12 week period. So Ross Mack, what suggestions do you have for MBA ones on ways to budget some of that income to avoid taking out additional loans in their second year?
Yeah, I think one thing that no one likes to talk about is budgeting, right? It's not a sexy topic, right? No one wants to do that type of level of accounting, right? Everybody wants to continue to live life like they're rich, right? We turn on Instagram, effectively everybody's a millionaire, right? And that's kind of the world we live in, when the reality is 70% of Americans, not just Black people, but 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 saved. So the reality is budgeting is an actual problem for everybody. And so I think the first thing, people need to do is just understand, right, that business school, you have to understand what your opportunity cost is, right? You're obviously foregoing income to pay out money, AKA tuition, right? And so when you have the ability to bring in income, I think what you need to think about is, what are going to be my future expenses? Obviously, you're going to have debt once you graduate, but you also might have room and board. You also are going to have maybe books, dining, and also the social aspect of business school, right? At the end of the day, my understanding is business school is an amazing experience, but a lot of partying going on, right? I see a lot of friends, you guys are traveling every other weekend, it looks like. And I think with a person who's in the position to have a great internship, who's probably bringing in 30K, you need to ask yourself, one, how can I start saving that? And also figure out ways, and I'm sure some of these amazing accountants on the board will be able to tell you, it might be a way that you can, find ways to write that off or some way in order when it comes to refund time, but I'll direct you to the people's CPA. But I think that when you're starting to actually think about, this next semester, how do you avoid taking out more debt? It's all about saving and budgeting, right? I think that I have a free downloadable budgeting, Excel spreadsheet in my bio. If you would go to Instagram, and you can literally get it. And the way I want you to think about it is saying 50%, you should be spending your money on necessities, 30% on your wants, and the other 20% is saving and paying down debt. So just a 50, 30, 20 rule when it comes to it. But when it comes to you guys, right, you obviously are not going to be having monthly income. So you want to start shifting that entire paradigm down, right? Those different percentages it's going to look a little differently. But, as you're forward thinking, it's always saying, let me start bucketing money for this, for that, right? And I think you need to start planning ahead, because they're going to be unexpected, Ross business school trips to Vail and Colorado or Puerto Rico. And I think what you have to do is start planning ahead and making sure that you're putting money aside so that you don't have, any unexpected, sources of outflows.
Awesome. That's awesome. Very, very timely advice. And the post MBA roles will provide higher income, but earned income alone, can't alone make us significant progress towards closing the wealth gap. So, we did talk a little bit earlier about having that secondary income, but Dr. Roshana, given you're an entrepreneur, I wanted to get your thoughts on secondary income and starting businesses on the side. And, is this about best route for everyone?
So I have always believed in having multiple income streams. So even though my education was fully paid for, I still had a full-time job because I wanted to make more money, right? And I was able to save like half of my income or most of my income from my job because I also had a stipend from school as well. And so I've always had that mindset to have multiple streams of income. And one good way is real estate. So I'm a huge fan of having either rental properties or renting out rooms in your house. When Airbnb first came out, I was like one of the first people to sign up, and it was a game changer in terms of I made enough rent that almost equaled my salary just from renting to certain high-end types of people and making an experience for them. And then separate to that is uh, jobs that you actually have to exchange time for money for. In that regard, you have to really make sure to figure out what kind of balance you may have, because some people work, two full-time jobs that are very taxing intellectually, very taxing physically, and very taxing mentally. I definitely recommend, if possible, to have that second stream to be like that easy money, maybe like the speaking engagements, maybe entertainment, TV, something, radio, something where you can multiply, get residuals from your work. Even if you are exchanging time for money for your primary job, try to think about long-term income for that second job that you have.
That's beautiful. Definitely love to be able to land some speaking engagements like you guys in the future. So as post MBA students, many of us will venture into careers that, like we talked about, generate these higher salaries than we're used to, and in some cases, maybe even higher salaries than our parents. So the people CPA, what are some things that we should be aware of once we get the bag? Higher tax bracket, retirement, like what should we really be looking out for?
So, all right, I love like incorporating rap music into like my teachings. So it's all about getting the bag, but then Gucci Mane said, "You get the bag and fumble it, I get the bag and flip it and tumble it," right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna need for y'all to do that same thing. It's about getting that bag and flipping and tumbling. So when I started my career right after school, I worked for a Big Four accounting firm, and I got a pretty good salary. I passed the CPA exam, so I got a bonus. So, have a little money coming in. But again, my mind was always on wealth building. Like, I don't know where it came from, because I'm literally the first in my family to do entrepreneurship, to venture into home ownership, and to have, a portfolio of nearly 15 doors so far. And I'm only 26 years old. So like my mom was always on, I just need more wealth, more wealth, more wealth, because I had to watch my mother struggle in raising us by herself. And I was just always telling myself that as soon as I get the opportunity to, I'm gonna make sure my mom knows that for her, work is now going to be an option. And now, thank God, she knows that. She wants to quit her job today. She's going to be good because her daughter got her, right? So while I was working in Big Four, I was staying in my mom's house. I did not jump into getting an apartment or buying a condo or, going to live with anybody. I stayed right in my mama's house, and I took the train, didn't buy a car, took the train back and forth to Yonkers, to Grand Central, to go to work for the Big Four accounting firm that I was at. And I ended up saving like $35,000 in my first year of being out of school, which is, more than half of my net take home pay and my salary. And with that $35,000 I did have, I bought my mom the house that we currently live in now. And yes, I still live with my mom. I'm 26 years old. But even by buying this one house, we bought this house 2.5 years ago, and we bought it for like a price. And now from today, we have around 50K in equity sitting in the house, right? So just by holding this one asset for 2 years, we now have 50K in equity. My mom is not really familiar with the equity stuff is and how to deal with it, but I am, right? So it was more about figuring out ways to understand that when I was getting this bag, I'm going to figure out ways to flip it and tumble it, right? So it's by investing in real estate. I also used some of that savings to start my business, which in its first year jumped into being a 6-figure generating business. And, we're on track to, hopefully reach $500,000 this year. And that's just with one business venture. So again, it's all about when you get this money, how can you flip it and tumble it? So whether it's real estate or or you want to go invest into the stock market, there's ways to literally double your income in the stock market in just one day if you sit down and really learn how to do it. So never get comfortable. And I always tell people, you can be content, but never like be content permanently, right? You want to be temporarily content because there's always an extra level up. And we have to get out of that mindset thinking that, okay, I got this career, that's it, I'm good, I'm a chill. Because I'm gonna tell y'all, no, as I said before, you can't pass down your job to your children. You can't use that job to take care of your family forever. Your assets can. So you want to make sure that when we're flipping and tumbling the bag, we are investing in things that are going to generate us more income, because the whole goal is to not continue trading our time for money forever. We have to do it temporarily to gain capital, but once you have capital, it's all about how to make your capital earn you more capital without you doing much of the work anymore, right? You want to be able to work, a 4-hour work week and you're still getting paid as you were getting paid. It feels a lot better. And I love that, Dr. Rashana talked about being able to discover yourself. You can't take a 6-week break from your job. That's just to break that to you, unless you're using your whole vacation pay for the whole year. But when you jump into entrepreneurship, when you jump into investing in real estate or the stock market, and you're affording yourself the freedom to make money without sacrificing your time, you can now do things that involve pouring more into yourself as an individual, spending more time for healthcare. The more you invest into yourself, the more you can spit back out. So a lot of Americans are stuck in that whole rat wheel of, I make money, I pay my bills, I'm broke again. Make money, pay my bills, I'm broke again. You want to get into that wheel where it's okay, I make money, I afford myself this amount of time. I do self-development. I go to the spa. I read books, etc. And I invest. I make more money. And now that time that you have for yourself increasingly becomes bigger and bigger. You can use that time for self-development or to start several different other business ventures. But ultimately, by you achieving financial freedom, it's not just about the money. It's more so about getting your time back for yourself.
Wow. Talking about doubling your money in the stock market in a day, you must have been in on GameStop, huh?
Maybe.
Oh man. So now I wanna get to the elephant in the room, those student loans. Everybody's thinking about them. They either got them, know somebody who got them. So Ross, Matt, I wanted to get your take on how we should tackle student loan debt. Is debt consolidation the best way to go, or should we aggressively pursue debt loan repayments and avoid the leisure luxury lifestyle? And what's really sustainable long term, or should we just wait for Biden to go ahead and write all these loans off? What's the best approach here?
Great question. I think, to everyone in the audience who's going to have a decent amount of debt when it's all said and done, I think, you have to just start prioritizing, how you should live your life. And I think one great way of doing this is definitely trying to consolidate your debt to start trying to get a smaller interest rate some way, somehow, right? And I think when you're starting to think about, the opportunity cost of your capital, you want to say, okay, what is the interest rate that I could be making versus what is the interest rate that I'm paying out via this debt? Now, I'm gonna be one of those people that be a little salty if Biden cancels, $50,000 of debt because I no longer have student loan debt. But, I think it definitely impacts our community the most. So therefore, I'm all in favor for it. But I think the way you start thinking about it is not trying to live beyond your means, right? If you have $20,000 in student loan debts, but you're still traveling every other month, right? I think you should start trying to prioritize ways to get out of debt. And I think that, and I always tell people I think one great way of paying down debt in general is you can look at it either the debt avalanche method or the debt snowball method. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is just line up all of your debt. And if we look at it from an avalanche standpoint, that would be you're lining up all your debt from the highest interest rates to the lowest interest rate. And you're trying to start knocking off the largest debt that has the highest interest rate, right? And so therefore, I think that in the event, student loans might wrap around 6% or so, I'm gonna be a person to tell you that if you have credit card loans that you're paying out 20%, try to address that first, right? That is what I consider true bad debt. I in fact tell people, don't even invest into the stock market unless you've paid off that 18 to 22% interest rate loans, because the reality is the average return in the stock market itself is only 10%, right? On, the long-term average of the S&P 500. So therefore, when you start thinking about, the opportunity cost with each income, right? Or outflows for paying out on debt, or what you could potentially be making, kind of like the people CPA and her GameStop positions, what you could be making in the stock market. But, I think at the end of the day, for anyone that's incurring student loan debt, I think that you should start trying to prioritize it, as well as trying to find a way to actually consolidate it. There are a lot of different, programs and different ways of trying to get it. Obviously, Dr. Rashana might have a way to get you a grant or something like that. But, at the end of the day, I think the way you prioritize it is first saying, okay, what's the highest interest rate? Then in the event that my student loans, if I got 30, 40,000 and it's, 5, 6, 7%, I do think that you want to start chipping away at that, because, when you wake up and you're no longer paying, Fannie Mae, Sally Mae, or that'd be Sally Mae. It's a different, conversation, a different way you stretch in the morning because you're debt free, right? And I think that, prioritizing paying down debt is something that it really make you happier. I think it might even make you live longer, right? There's no actual, it might not be any actual medical evidence to support that, but I do believe that the way you start prioritizing is writing it down, and actually saying, okay, what could I afford to pay the minimum on all of the debt accounts that I have, while trying to put any extra towards one of these other balances, right? And I think that when it comes to student loans, definitely consolidate and try to start paying it down, though.
Great advice, man. I can't wait till I get that good stretch. It's coming.
The stretch, man. It's a different stretch.
So I wanted to talk to a specific group in the audience. So I'm sure there's many in the audience who are considering the entrepreneurship route post B school, but it can be a tough and uncertain path, especially given, the state of the economy right now. Betting on yourself versus taking the less risk-averse corporate job can sometimes be the difference in one's ability to create true generational wealth. So, Dr. Rashana, given your platform built to empower entrepreneurs, what advice would you give students facing this situation?
It's really what Ross said. Essentially, you have to make a budget and plan and look at the opportunity cost. So, when I decided to leave corporate and become a full-time entrepreneur, I had the 2 years of my living expenses saved. And I know if you're just leaving business school, if you had that, you probably just paid off your tuition and didn't save it. So if you're in that position, maybe entrepreneurship is a perfect time for you. I definitely recommend for those who don't have corporate experience to first have at least a couple years of corporate experience before you become an entrepreneur. But know that all those case studies about, Fortune 100 companies are mostly irrelevant when you start a sole proprietorship, or you have only 10 employees. You, as the CEO of your company, are going to have to do the marketing, the operations, the technology, like the sales, like everything. Whereas a lot of what I learned in business school was focused on having, large teams and being in a well-resourced kind of environment. So just do a self-assessment to say, hey, am I a person who's a risk seeker? Do I fully believe in myself and my capabilities? Because you have to have that mindset. Just because you're smart and you get straight A's in school does not mean you'll be a good entrepreneur. Do you know how to talk about yourself? Do you know how to build strategic partnerships and strategic relationships? Are you okay if a contract falls apart, even though that person said yes? It was gonna close and then they never spoke to you again. Are you gonna be depressed, right? So do all of these self-assessment studies with yourself before you jump into entrepreneurship. But I say all that to say, I do believe that having economic power is the way to change the world. More women, more people of color, especially Black people, need to own our own businesses. We need to shape the economy in a way that we want it to look. We want to have our own, preferences, how we want things to be the mirror of it. And so there's a lot of noise about this platform called Clubhouse, which has like 70% Black people like communicating. And, within 6 months time, it's worth $1 billion. And not that many Black people have stock ownership in this app. And so we need to be mindful about how we want to enter the entrepreneurship world, whether we want to be a CEO, whether we want to invest in Black-owned businesses. But it's really important to know who you are, have that budget together and, make decisions in alignment with that.
That's great advice. So now I wanted to kind of shift gears, just practical tips for really everyone. So, in the past 20 years, the democratization of finance has made it possible for the average person to substantially increase their wealth by investing in stocks, like we talked about earlier. But many people in the audience have disposable income or that they're willing to put in the stocks market, but they may not know where to start. So Ross, what should their strategy be when looking at investing in stocks? How should they handle the lack of information or understanding around stocks and which ones to pick in particular?
Great question. For everyone in the audience, I have a investment community, Maconomics Investment Club, where I try to walk people through the best way to approaching how to invest, right? I'm an investor who's going to invest for the long term, right? I teach people how to not only think about the long term, but buy the best companies that are gonna continue to run the world or be in a very great position to run the world in 5 to 10 years. But when you're first starting out, one of the best forms of advice I can give you is start out with a index fund. This is going to give you the ability to own some of the best companies in just one small basket of goods. And one of the best investors of all time, my cousin Warren Buffett, he'll tell you, the average investor should just buy the index and hold it for long term. I alluded to this earlier, but once again, the index, the S&P 500, one of the most common ones, representing 500 of the world's best companies, Apple, Amazon, Google, Tesla, literally the list goes on, 495 other amazing companies, or 96, 496. But that being said, you have the ability to own these best companies as well as having these amazing CEOs effectively work for you. You're a shareholder, right? And so the long-term investment horizon, you're going to get 10% annualized. And not a lot of people, hear that and say, oh, let me do it, because they're nervous. Obviously, in our community, we have reasons to not trust certain things, especially maybe the banking system or something. But when it comes to the stock market, S&P 500 is extremely representative of America, right? America's economy. In the event that it goes down one year or 1 month, understand that within the next few years, it's more than likely going to recover, as well as outperform what it did over the past year or so. And so when I'm telling a person to first start out, I believe you should first look at an index fund. Is going to give you the ability to have great diversification. Ask yourself, about a year ago, if all you had in your portfolio were airlines, right? And then coronavirus hit, you would have saw your portfolio go down 80%, and you would have been extremely upset, right? And that happens for a person who's too concentrated in an individual sector. However, being in the S&P 500, you would have already been more diversified. You would have had great tech companies, great consumer discretionary, consumer staples, healthcare, financial companies. You would have had everything, the entire gamut. So therefore, you would have been able to stomach some of those other losses. So once again, to the people in the audience, if you are interested in investing, I'm going to urge you to do one thing: do it. Jump off the porch. It's the only way that I believe we could truly start. Well, one of the only ways that we could start truly building generational wealth. But, don't be nervous, because if you're a long-term investor, you're going to make money. I think a lot of people get in here, they buy a stock, and then it goes down 10%. Man, I'm taking my money out. The moment you take your money out, you're going to realize that loss. And then more importantly, you're going to look up in 2-3 months, and you would have looked at, if only you would have stayed, or 1 year or 2 years, you would have actually made money. And so, to the audience, definitely start off with index funds. And then the next thing I'm going to tell you is start off trying to buy the best companies that are going to run the world, and you'll own them for a lifetime. I own companies that I probably never want to sell. Another thing my cousin Warren Buffett to tell you is, don't own a company if you can't see yourself owning it for at least 10 years. And, for me, I love trying to find the companies that are going to run the world, right? Just a quick little, little free game, little free gem is ask yourself where the world is going, right? The world is going green. By 2035, you have not only California saying they're going to try to ban combustible engine, AKA gas powered cars. You have countries doing that. China trying to do it as well. Europe, America. You hear Biden come in saying he wants the entire government fleet to be electric. Well, that should let you know, not only do you want electric cars, but you want to have that entire gamut, right? I have a YouTube about this to give you a better understanding. But, when you think about the entire landscape of electric vehicles, not just the cars, but you're going to want the chips that go into the cars. You're going to want the, AKA call it like a gas station, well, charging stations. And you're going to want the stuff that makes the batteries, right? Lithium, as well as battery manufacturers. So just a free gem, but I have an entire YouTube on it if you guys want to check it out. But that's how you start thinking about when it's investing. What's going to run the world 5 years, 10 years from now? I think the world is going to be, I think the world's going to look amazing, right? A lot of AI, right? A lot of electric vehicles, self-driving technology. We might come outside and just cars are driving by themselves, right? And it's going to be a real interesting world, but that's how you want to start formulating your thesis. But for a person that doesn't want to do that much analysis, just buy the index. You can make $1 million if you put $250 into the S&P 500 every month in 30 years. A little less, but that's just a fact, right? No one thinks about that. We, in our community, we don't have that level of patience, and it's rightfully so, because we're starting the race, you know, maybe like 20,000 laps behind, but the fact is we in the race, and, you know, for a person that's disciplined and consistent, you can become a millionaire, you know, in the stock market.
We're trying to come out sprinting in the race, but I mean, definitely, Kivas, I could talk about the stock market all day, so definitely gonna have to go check out your YouTube series. But I guess I wanted to shift gears a little bit to the private market, and I'm trying to keep it 700. And when I say 700, I'm talking about your credit score. You know, there's no doubt that home ownership is one of the major ways to amass wealth, but most Black people can't get approved from banks because their credit score is less than 700. So the People CPA, given your background in real estate, I wanted to ask you a two-part question. So one, how can Black people increase their credit score to 700 plus? And two, how do we leverage credit post MBA or even now to buy real estate, whether that be commercial, residential, wholesale, etc.?
Okay, so really good question and very important topic, because credit is important. They say cash is king in this country, but credit is also king. So we got two of them bad boys. So essentially, in order to increase your credit score, it's all about just, you know, being mindful of the factors that go into influencing what your credit score ultimately becomes, right? So that's going to be, of course, your payment history. It's going to also be your utilization rate. On average, they say to keep it below 30. I'll challenge people to keep their utilization below 20, because if, you know, things go wrong and you need to borrow against your credit, you still have that 10% window, right? And then also, it's going to be about the type of debt that you have on your credit as well. So whether you have a use of, you know, user cards like store cards, so say, for example, Macy's, Victoria's Secret, etc., that does influence your credit score as well. And also your length of credit influences your score as well. So essentially, knowing what factors impact your credit score, you want to be paying attention to those things. You want to make sure that, number one, so many of you, I mean, you know, college students, so you may not have like big credit cards now. When I started building my credit, I just started off with store cards. I had Victoria's Secret, I had American Eagle, you know, just a basic store card to start with. And that's fine, because it gives you, you know, a little bit of flexibility to test how you're going to be with paying your debt back. Another important thing is that even when you have a credit card, you never want to spend above your means. I think that the reason why credit destroyed this country as much as it did is because people were using it to spend above their means, right? So you're giving credit access to people who already are living kind of sort of in poverty. Well, guess what? They're going to use that credit to buy things that they could never afford on their own. So when you are starting to go up your credit building journey, the whole challenge is to make sure that you are only buying things that you would have already had afford, given the fact that you use your own income, with the exception of buying things that you know are going to generate you more money, right? So I'm never going to say, no, don't use your credit and overspend that 30% limit to fund your business. Nope, that makes sense, because ultimately, hopefully, that business will generate you money to pay it back. The issue is people are using credit to buy things that don't generate nothing back, right? So again, the whole conversation about bad debt and good debt. When using your credit card to buy things like bags, sneakers, these things, number one, depreciate in value almost instantly. And when you resell, you're not reselling it for what you bought that thing for. So ultimately, by you using it and you buying credit, like, yes, you know, it's something that you're going to enjoy, but it didn't contribute to your economic well-being. Maybe it made you feel good, and that's okay. If you're about that, then that's great too. But rather than, like, even for my first like couple investment projects, I leveraged my credit. I didn't want to take out a loan yet because I wanted to save my FHA loan to buy another home. So I used my credit to fund my first investment property. I had $20K in available credit. Well, I only needed $15,000 of that, and I got to pay it off on my own terms because it's my own credit, right? So number one is, again, being aware of what factors influences your credit. And again, do not miss any payments. Don't, if you are having a payment, you want to make sure that you have the schedule. If you're going to forget, I'm forgetful because I have so much stuff going on. So I do just schedule my payments there. And then again, being mindful of how much I spend, and of course, how much I am applying for, because your inquiries also influence your credit score. You don't want to have 10 inquiries on there because looking like you're trying to apply for too many cards, it's going to make your credit score go down. So that answers question one. So now question two, leveraging credit. I gave you the example about using it to fund a real estate project. However, again, you can use credit to leverage and, buy anything else that's going to generate you some more money. So a good example of this is Walmart, right? Owning shares of Walmart, but then also understanding how Walmart actually makes their own money. I love accounting because it literally teaches you, like, it's not just about, oh, here's the profit. I can literally look at a company's profit and loss statement and their balance sheet and tell exactly how they operated and how they got to where they are, which is super cool to me. So Walmart is a perfect example of a Fortune 500 company that actually runs most of their operations on credit, right? Walmart got credit card. They have lines of credit with different companies. What they do is buy most of their products on credit, and they use that sale of that product to help pay that credit off, right? So now they have, cash flow without spending their actual cash, which is powerful, right? The reason most people who have credit, they spend these things and there's no cash back guarantee besides the 5% that they give you, right? Walmart is making $1 billion from their cash back, right? We get to preserve our cash reserves, but then also leverage credit to buy asset, which is our inventory, use that inventory to go ahead and contribute more cash into us, which increases our cash balance sheet. So literally they're running their multi-billion-dollar business by using others people's money, AKA OPM. And that's the benefits of leveraging credit the right way.
Appreciate that. So we have a few minutes left on the panel. I definitely wanted to open it up to the audience to see if anyone has any questions. So participants, if you can raise your hand if you have a question, and I will bring you up to talk. So it looks like we have Titus Potter. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. My question is in regards to investing. I know, Mr. Mack, you mentioned earlier, as well as the People CBA, well, actually everyone here mentioned earlier about investing. But if you have paid off your consumer debt, but you have student loans left, would you recommend investing in regards, smart investing? Do you believe the revenue would surpass the student loans, or would you say focus on your student loan debt?
That's a good question.
Extremely great question. You want to handle it, or should I take it?
You go ahead and take it. You're the investment guy.
So, Titus,
Yes.
what on average, what would you say your student loan interest rate is going to be? Right, 6%?
Well, I went to law school, so I actually have my JD, and I'm admitted in New York. Currently, I have about $253K in student loan with the interest rate of about, I think the highest for my student loans is like 6.8%. I have all government loans. So I'm actually in the student loan forgiveness category.
Gotcha. So here's what I'll say. Short answer is you can invest. The long answer is obviously it's going to depend, and you can obviously speak with a registered, professional to actually help walk you through it. But this is how I formulate my opinion. And it's always about opportunity costs, right? And so, in other words, if you're paying out 7%, 6.8% on average to make 10% on average, you're going to have that kind of 3.2% difference. And that's what you would call your profit, right? And the reason I even formulated that 10%, and just to give you an idea, right? If you invested into the stock market if you just started investing in the stock market, especially if you got in last year, especially at the bottoms, you would have been up, S&P was up 14%. The NASDAQ was up 43%, right? And so when you start thinking about, the type of money you can make in the stock market, you can outpace the amount that you're paying in student loans. Now, however, everything comes with considerable risk, because you have to understand that the stock market can go down, the stock market can continue to go up. But understand the stock market has been going up largely based on the government, the Federal Reserve, keeping interest rates near zero. So I could get into that, but I'll get into that, and that's a story for another day. But that's a great thing for the stock market, because it forces institutional investors to continue to buy stocks, because bonds aren't really giving you a good return on their investment. So very short answer is, it's going to depend. But the way I'm formulating my opinion is, can I make more than 6.8% in the stock market? On average, the history is going to tell you, yes, you can. Absolutely. History is going to show you the S&P 500 has been making 10% annualized. Now, when you're starting to think about that, I think everything starts off with budgeting. And I believe that if you start off budgeting, you start figuring out how you can cut back on some of your other expenses, and you start actually formulating a plan to knock down that student loans, right? And I think that as you're doing maybe the minimum and maybe a little extra than that, as well as making a plan to start investing, because when I tell a person to invest, I'm not telling you to just start off with $2,000-$3,000 and never invest again. The idea is to make consistent investments, whether it's the first of the month, the 15th of the month. I try to tell people to invest every month, right? And I think that's the strategy. That's how you make money long term. And once you start investing, you'll start seeing that consistent level of return. But understand there's considerable risk anytime you're in the stock market, right? It can go down, it can go up. Just on average, it goes up, right? There could be a year it goes down 20%, 30%, and you'll be like, man, Ross, I should have never listened to him because I could have used that money. But the reality is, if you stick in the stock market has always gone up historically. If the stock market goes down, it stays down, that probably means the world is coming to an end, or America's in a crazy war or something, right? And I don't foresee that. So there's always risk. But I think the way you want to look at that is saying, is there an investment that I can outpace how much I'm paying out, right? You're paying out, say you got $100 in loans, you're paying out $6.08 a year, right? That's how much you're paying. But if you put that $100 in the stock market, you're making $10 on average. So therefore, you got that $3.20 of a difference. That's your profit. If that makes sense, Titus?
Yeah. Does this change your analysis I'm sorry.
I wanted to jump in and just add another thing that you should consider. And so every time I've ever had a bill, I try to create a strategy where someone else would pay for it. So another option is to invest in income generating property, and you make sure that any kind of revenue the tenants would pay would, of course, pay all their property expenses and your student loan bill. So you both have an asset that is appreciating in value, and somebody else is paying off all your bills. So that's how I usually structure it. Anytime I owe anyone money, I just make a plan to have, both my net worth increase and someone else pay for it. So yeah.
And I just want to add to what Dr. Rashana said. I am all for that specific way of doing things. So I guess we can kind of all agree that, that's the preferred way. Because what you don't want to do is, spend your cash. Cash is exhaustible. Once it's spent, that's it. Unless you spend it in an asset, now it's going to generate you something back. Because even going as far as understanding the concept of a mortgage, right? That's a debt as well. In certain places like California, you can actually wrap your student loan into your mortgage payment. The good thing about doing that is that in hopes you can still have equity on top of that. So not only did you get rid of your student loan, like in theory, because now it's wrapped into your one monthly payment with your mortgage, you still have equity that you can use to leverage. So your cash expenditure now went to zero. You have your cash left in your pocket, but then now you also have equity in your home. And then the good thing about leveraging equity and leveraging debt is that it's, kind of like tax-free dollars, right? So I do love that whole concept of whenever you're thinking about paying debt, first think about how can you make more money. I hate when my friends, because they think that, I'm Dr. Financial now, and I'm not. They come to me like, all right, well, how can I, pay down these debts? Should I budget? And I never tell people, oh, decrease your standard of living to pay down this debt. That sucks. Who wants to not eat good for a month to pay down some debt? I'm not. I love Ruth Chris. That's not going to happen. So instead of that, I'm trying to figure out a way, well, how can I double my money real quick? Let me figure out a way, whether it's doing a workshop, hosting a paint class, whatever it is, I'm going to figure out how to make that money to pay down that debt. So again, like Dr. Rashana said, and like Ross Mack said, it's about leveraging OPM. The stock market essentially, yes, is your initial investment, but any gain is OPM, right? So now you're using those gains to help pay down your debt. It's not costing you anymore, but you're getting your debt satisfied while also increasing your net worth simultaneously.
And that's great advice. So we are unfortunately running out of time, but just wanted to, I guess, have an opportunity to answer one more question for you all. And 10 to 15 years post MBA, we'll all be in a financially sound place. Going to speak that into existence. What will your suggestions be on ways to use everything we've learned on this panel today and give back and make sure people at large are making strides towards wealth accumulation? How can we better position our Black families, businesses, and communities to win?
So I'll jump in. I think it's really important for everyone to look at both their charitable giving and their investment dollars in terms of how can it positively impact the community, our community. And so at Enricher, you can donate to support Black owned businesses and get a tax deductible donation, so that'll decrease your taxable income, or you can invest for a fixed interest like a CD into Black owned businesses. So I set it up this way specifically to enable people who say, hey, I don't know how to allocate money to Black owned businesses that'll also help me in my financial life. So you have those two things with the Enricher platform. But whatever you do, think about society in as a whole, in large, and what kind of world do you want to see? Do you want other people that look like us to have economic power? Do you want your children to have access to more diverse leaders and diverse owned businesses, and make decisions in alignment with that?
I definitely agree. I think in this world, once you kind of realize like how the universe is created, everything is like a give and take thing, right? The reasons why rain produces water, and that goes into the ocean, and eventually it goes back into the sky. Everything is a cycle, and I think everything should be a cycle of understanding, well, your efforts they always come back to you directly, whether it's monetary or not. So in my way of thinking, I do believe that giving back is very important. Even if you're giving back and you're making money from it, you're still giving back. I help build Black owned businesses, but I get paid to do so, but I'm still having a direct impact. But then also, in terms of charitable giving, I do think that reaps you great rewards as well. So whether it's using your skills to do charitable acts, so like sometimes I get asked to coach students in like their pitch competitions for schools just to be on the board. I'm gonna do that, and that's my volunteer time. Or if I'm doing monetary donations, because I do also own a not-for-profit where we give scholarships out to Black owned businesses and college students who need some type of funding. So it's being able to give back in both ways. And I don't think monetary is just the only solution. Giving back your time as well is also important, which is why I'm happy to be here alongside Dr. Rashana and Ross Mack, because this is, charitable as well, just giving back time, because ultimately we're expecting a return, and that return is not going to be to us. Yes, in the long run, but essentially we're looking for you all to take this knowledge, these skills, go ahead and apply that to your personal lives, and come back to us with results.
I love it. Literally, I couldn't have said anything better than both what these amazing women just said, right? I think at the end of the day, continue to live in your purpose, continue to look beyond just your life and your family's life, right? Don't be selfish, right? Especially when it comes to your family as well as people that look like you, right? At the end of the day, live in your own purpose, make sure you have life insurance policies, make sure your family is in a better position than you were, right? Make sure your legacy is in a better position, find ways to give back, whether it's time or monetary, and support Black businesses, right? At the end of the day, right, when you hear, I want you to get upset at the fact that in 30 years, Black people are going to have zero net worth on average. So you ask yourself, how can you rectify that? How can you change that? And it starts with information, it starts with education, and it starts with supporting our community and supporting our people. And, you know, that's all I have. But everything these lovely people just said is amazing.
Man, I really love all the advice you all have given today. It has been an amazing last hour. I wish we had more time. There's so many more topics we could discuss. But I want to thank you for joining us today, and is looking forward to you know, applying all the knowledge and wealth of resources that you've given us today. So thank you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.